Do you know that 72% of Americans currently believe the economy is in a dire state? And what is truly shocking, 65% of middle-class families experience financial difficulties and do not expect improvements throughout their lives. But what I am about to reveal is not just another story of hardship. For the past 2 weeks, I have been analyzing economic reports and communicating with families across the country. And what I discovered is shocking. This crisis is not approaching. It has already arrived, affecting the everyday lives of Americans in ways that most do not even speak of. Pay attention, because I am about to show you how everyday life in America is collapsing before our eyes. And believe me, you need to hear this, regardless of whether you earn $50,000 or $150,000 a year. Before we delve deeper, let me be frank. This is not intimidation. These are facts confirmed by data from CBS News, CNN, and recent government reports. If this information helps you understand what is really happening, support this video, because in the next episodes, I will explain how to protect yourself. Now let's talk about what is really happening. A housing nightmare that no one anticipated. This is what will make you think. In the year 2025, the average housing price in major cities increased by 20 to 25% in just 3 years. Yes, you heard it right, by 20 to 25%. But here's where it gets really interesting. Recently, I spoke with Jennifer, a 34-year-old nurse from Boston who has been saving for a house for 6 years. And guess what? Her goal for the down payment is becoming increasingly unattainable. Last year, she needed $80,000. Now, for the same apartment, it requires $110,000, while her salary has barely increased. Let's break down the math that no one talks about. The Census Bureau reports that the average household income is about $74,500. But what is shocking is that the basic cost of a normal middle-class life, including mortgage, car, kindergarten, and health insurance, easily reaches $120,000 to $140,000 a year in most major cities. Do the math yourself. This is a difference of $45,000 to $65,000 each year. And tenants, do not think you are safe. The average rent reaches $1,800 in small towns and exceeds $3,000 in cities. This is 40 to 50% of net income, which is significantly more than the recommended 30%. What most people do not understand is that housing expenses are not just your monthly payments. When the kettle breaks, when property taxes rise, when insurance doubles, you are just one step away from financial disaster. A quick fact. A recent study showed that only 20% of young people believe they will live better than their parents. This is a historical minimum. Let's talk about the reality in supermarkets. Now about something you encounter every week, your grocery expenses. And believe me, what I'm going to tell you is not just statistics. These are real families making painful decisions just to survive. Listen closely. Rebecca White, a bank worker from Cincinnati, told NPR something that made me stop. She said, "Sometimes I skip breakfast and just eat at lunch and dinner to save money on another meal." Yes, you heard it right. A working professional skips meals to save on groceries. But here's where it gets really shocking. According to the latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for September 2025, inflation on food reached a 2-year high of 2.7%. This is the fastest growth since 2023. And before you think that 2.7% isn't so bad, wait for the real numbers. Steak prices have risen by 16.6% compared to last year. Ground meat has increased by almost 13%. Coffee prices jumped by 21% due to new tariffs. And eggs? My God, their price has increased by 165% since the start of the bird flu crisis in 2020. A box that cost you $2.52 2 years ago now peaks at $6.23. That's what really worries me. Last week, I spoke with Joseph Macias, a single father and cook from Colorado Springs. He said, "I try to find the cheapest products I can. Still, I spend $117 on perhaps 20 items, mostly just essentials for my fridge, paper towels, and a few things my 4-year-old daughter needs. 20 items, $117. Just the essentials. But that's not all. A recent national survey showed that Americans are now spending an average of $235 a week on groceries. Do the math with me. That's over $900 a month per person. A family of 4 spends $3,600 a month just on food. And here's what will surprise you. According to a study from the University of Florida, people do not assess the cost of groceries the way economists do. Shoppers compare what they pay today to what they paid several years ago, and the difference is enormous. Let me explain what this actually means. Food prices have risen by 29% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Almost half of Americans, 49%, say that today it is harder for them to afford groceries than a year ago. Only 19% stated that grocery prices have become cheaper. Let that sink in your mind. But here is the part that really made me angry. In the Washington area, a recent survey showed that 55% of households are now buying cheaper and less nutritious food to stretch their money. In simple terms, families are sacrificing nutrition for survival. And it's not just low-income families anymore. A survey showed that even households with incomes from $79,000 to $179,000 reported a decline in their finances. Think about it. People with six-figure incomes are struggling to buy groceries. Recently, I spoke with the manager of the Kroger supermarket, who shared concerning information. He noted that customers are making more frequent but smaller purchases, using more coupons than ever, and switching to cheaper private label products. But here is what is truly surprising. He said that people come to the store, tense, calculating every purchase and putting items aside before the checkout. A quick analysis of reality. 1/3 of households now use credit cards for grocery purchases, and 20% were unable to pay off the full debt at the end of the month. This means that people are forced to take loans to feed their families. So the next time someone tells you the economy is thriving, remember Rebecca skipping breakfast, Joseph spending $117 on $20 goods, and millions of Americans choosing between paying rent and buying healthy food. This is the reality in grocery stores in the year 2025. A healthcare crisis that no one is prepared for. And here, it becomes truly frightening. The average cost of health insurance for a family rose to $23,968 a year in the year 2023. This is 7% more than in 2020. But here's what is worse. This is just the premium. Last week, I spoke with Jeremy, a web developer from Kansas. Next year, his family medical premiums will rise by 18% to $2,600 a month. He told me something that will be remembered for a long time. We are not talking about eating beans and rice, but about the transition from a comfortable average life to how we ate when we just graduated from college. And if you think this is bad, wait until you hear this. Tax credits helping families pay for health insurance will expire at the end of 2025. The Society's fund estimated that nearly 5 million Americans will lose health insurance next year. Let me explain what this really means. Households with low and middle incomes receiving tax credits will see their bonuses increase from $888 in 2025 to $1,114 in 2026. That's more than a doubling, friends. A quick warning. If you rely on ACA subsidies, you need to prepare for this now, not next year. A debt trap that engulfs families entirely. Now let's talk about what most news outlets don't report properly. The debt crisis quietly destroying the American middle class. Listen to this. 59% of Americans do not have enough savings to cover even $1,000 in unexpected expenses. Let that sink in. 6 out of 10 people cannot handle unexpected expenses of $1,000. But what really surprised me when I delved into the research was that credit card debt reached a 13-year high. Families use credit cards not for luxury, but to cover rent, insurance, and grocery bills. Recently, I spoke with Sarah, a public school teacher in a large city. She works full-time, has a master's degree, but cannot afford to leave her tiny studio apartment. Why? Because she has $18,000 in credit card debt, just trying to survive for the last 3 years. This is the pattern I see everywhere. One unexpected expense, like car repairs or a medical bill, and families that thought they were fine suddenly find themselves in a deadlock. The economic consequences are frightening. High debt-to-income ratios reduce purchasing power, limit participation in the housing market, and effectively drag people into a financial quagmire. Unexpected energy bills. Let's talk about something that hits your wallet harder than you might realize. Utility costs. Americans now pay an average of $265 a month for utilities. This is 12% more than last year. But here is what really raises concern. In the year 2025, more than 124 million Americans will face rising electricity rates. This is what major energy companies do not want you to know. These are not temporary spikes. Demand for electricity exceeds supply, and these costs will only rise. I spoke with Maria, a single mother from Florida, whose electricity bill increased from $180 to $310 in just 1 year. The same house, the same level of consumption. Nothing has changed except the rates. And this is what most people overlook. The energy burden weighs 3 to 4 times heavier on low and middle income families who spend 6 to 10% of their income on energy, while wealthier households pay a smaller percentage. Quick advice. I learned from an energy expert that even if you turn off all the lights, some fixed costs are inevitable, such as delivery fees. You pay for the infrastructure, whether you use it or not. Now let's talk about the childcare crisis. It makes me angry, as it affects millions of families. In 2024, the average annual cost of caring for one child exceeded $13,000. This is 30% more than in 2020. But here's where it gets completely insane. This is just the average. In large cities, families pay between $1,000 to $1,500 per child per month. Do you know what that means? A family with 2 children in daycare spends between $24,000 to $36,000 a year just so the parents can work and earn money. I recently spoke with David and Michelle, a couple from Seattle, both working full-time and earning a total of $135,000. Sounds good, right? You're mistaken. After paying for childcare, housing, and basic expenses, they have $400 left each month for everything else. Savings, emergency fund, literally for everything. That's what is truly surprising. Research has shown that the cost of childcare now exceeds the cost of college education in 38 states. Think about that. Childcare costs more than college. Now consider the commuting costs that have returned. This has surprised many. Many companies are forcing employees to return to the office after several years of remote work. What does this mean? The average American now spends over $200 a month on fuel, parking, and public transport, plus increased childcare costs. I was talking to Robert, who had been working remotely for 3 years. His company called everyone back to the office. His monthly expenses suddenly increased by $480 for gas, parking, and after-school childcare. But what no one considers is the time. Now, he spends 10 hours a week commuting. That's 520 hours a year that could be spent with family or doing extra work to offset all these increased expenses. And finally, let's unveil some illusion of salary growth. Over the last decade, real wages adjusted for inflation have increased by less than 0.5% per year, while the cost of living has risen much faster. In 2024, inflation fluctuated between 3 and 4%. However, the wage growth for people with average income is only about 2%. This means you are losing purchasing power every year. Recently, I came across a study that showed a household with an income of $100,000 today has the same purchasing power as a household with an income of $80,000 in the year 2020. Let me repeat that. If you earn 6 figures today, you live as if you earned $80,000 just 5 years ago. A quick check-in question. That's why it seems like you work harder than ever. But in reality, you're falling behind. Because that's exactly how it is. Mental health. No one measures it. There is something that is not reflected in economic reports, but it is just as real. A mental health crisis caused by financial stress. According to the American Psychological Association, money is the main cause of stress for over 60% of Americans. But here is what really struck me. Economic instability is linked to depression, anxiety, burnout, and low life satisfaction. Families postpone marriage, children, and retirement due to constant financial uncertainty. I spoke with Dr. Chen, a psychologist specializing in financial stress. Last week, she told me that she sees more patients than ever. Couples argue over money, parents feel guilty for not being able to provide for their children, and people are stuck in hated jobs to pay the bills. This is the truth. No one wants to talk about how financial stress affects all areas of life, from physical health to family happiness. The cost is not only monetary, but deeply personal. The dream of retirement slips away. Let me share something that should scare everyone over 40. The pension funding crisis. Here's what I learned. 46% of Americans do not have $500 saved for a rainy day. Forget about retirement. We are talking about basic emergency reserves, but this is where it gets really bleak. If middle-class households do not save enough money now, their future will be far from comfortable. I recently talked to Michael. He is 52 years old, works in information technology, earns $95,000 a year, and has $27,000 in his retirement account. And that's all. After 30 years of work, he told me something bitter. I know I won't be able to retire at 65, probably not even at 70. I will work as long as I can physically, and he is not alone. A recent survey showed that 40% of all Americans cannot plan their finances beyond the next paycheck. The anchor of student debt. Now let's talk about the generational burden that continues to drag families down due to student debt. Millennials and members of Generation Z, many of whom are already in their peak earning period, are still haunted by student loans. Monthly payments can amount to hundreds or even thousands of dollars. But here's what most people don't realize. It's not just the borrowers who suffer. Many parents have signed loans or are still paying off additional debts. For middle-class families, this means delaying home purchases, foregoing vacations, and struggling to save. It's a generational chain of debt that cannot be broken. I spoke with Amanda. She is 35, has a master's degree, works as a marketing manager, and pays $780 a month in student loans. She told me, I earn decently, but I can't afford to buy a house, save for retirement, or even think about children, a system that is actually broken. This is what no one in Washington wants to admit. The system itself is fundamentally flawed. According to recent analysis, the share of Americans in middle-class households has decreased from 61% in 1971 to about 51% in 2023. Let me explain what this really means. The middle class is literally disappearing. But what angers me is that when I looked at the data, it turned out that productivity growth has not proportionately reflected in workers' incomes. Translation: companies are earning more than ever, but workers do not see these benefits. Recent studies show that the link between performance and compensation has weakened over the past few decades. Thus, even when the economy grows, the average worker hardly notices improvements. I spoke with an economist who stated this directly. We have created a system where economic growth occurs, but ordinary families do not benefit from it. This is not capitalism, it is a rigged game. A political divergence that exacerbates the situation. Now here's what will truly disappoint you. Politicians on both sides seem to be unaware of and indifferent to this issue. According to a recent survey, only 19% of Americans stated that food prices have decreased compared to last year, despite government reports indicating a reduction in inflation. This is why it is important. Buyers assess the value of products based on their everyday expenses, not on economic formulas that paint rosy pictures. The Trump administration recently announced new policies. But here is what experts warn. Tariffs can reduce the real growth of gross domestic product by 0.9% and potentially worsen rather than alleviate the cost of living crisis. Meanwhile, government subsidies for childcare, food assistance, and housing vouchers have either been cut or expired. Let me clarify. I am not going to take a political side. I am here to speak the truth. Both parties have let ordinary Americans down, the warning signs that everyone ignores. That is what really keeps me awake at night. All signs indicating a deeper crisis are glowing red. Consumer confidence is at a record low. Credit card debt is at its highest level in 13 years. 40% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. But here is what economists quietly warn. We may face a recession in the year 2025 if current trends continue. I spoke with William Luther, an economics professor at the University of Florida. He told me there is a reasonable chance that we are heading towards a recession. The Federal Reserve System may overcorrect the situation in response to past inflation, and ordinary families will pay the price for it. A quick warning: the stock market may show good results, but it doesn't help 80% of Americans who have no significant investments. Let me put it all together, because it's important for you to understand the big picture. We witnessed the destruction of everyday life in America, slowly and inexorably tearing families apart. As a web developer, cannot afford health insurance. A nurse with a master's degree cannot leave her tiny apartment. A couple earning $135,000 has only $400 left after all expenses. It's not about poverty. It's about the disappearance of stability, security, and hope for the future. Recently, I came across a quote that describes this perfectly. The economy is thriving, but many Americans are still choking on financial difficulties. They simply have no ability to plan for anything beyond their immediate needs. This is where we are in the year 2025. Survival, not prosperity. Now about what causes the most irritation. We know what could help, but no one does anything. Experts say we need to build more housing, raise salaries, tie them to inflation, expand childcare subsidies, make healthcare accessible, and reform the student loan system. But the reality is, none of this is happening. Instead, We receive rates that raise prices, budget cuts that harm families, and tax breaks that mainly benefit the rich. I'm not trying to engage in politics. I'm telling you what the data shows. An economist told me, we have chosen a path that prioritizes short-term profit over long-term stability for ordinary families, and we are beginning to see the consequences. Listen, I understand this is hard, but you need to know the truth to prepare. This is what I learned from talking to families who managed to cope with difficulties. You cannot control the system, but you can control your reaction. First, track every penny spent. I mean, everything. You will be surprised where your budget actually goes. Secondly, create even a small reserve fund, $500, $1,000, anything to avoid debt from minor unexpected expenses. Thirdly, look for ways to increase income, side jobs, freelancing, or anything legal that brings in extra money. Fourthly, connect with the community, exchange skills, share resources, help each other. People who survive this crisis do not do it alone. And most importantly, talk about it and share this video with friends, family, and colleagues. The more people understand what is really happening, the more pressure we can exert on leaders to start addressing these issues. I am most concerned about the future we are heading towards. If current trends continue, we face a future where being middle class means constant financial anxiety. Several economists warned that we may witness a fundamental change in American society, an increase in wealth disparity, a decline in economic mobility, and entire generations unable to achieve what their parents had. I recently read a report that said, the cost of living crisis of 2025 was a turning point in America's economic history. This will affect us for many years to come. We are experiencing historical changes, and most people don't even realize it. Listen, I didn't create this video to scare you. I made it to wake you up. The collapse of everyday life in America has officially begun, but collapse doesn't mean everything will fall at once. It's a slow destruction of stability, security, and hope. Here is what is important to remember. You are not alone in your struggles. 65% of middle-class Americans are in the same situation. You are not failing. The system is failing you. When a nurse cannot afford an apartment, when a couple earning six figures has nothing to save, when 40% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, this is not an individual failure. It is a systemic crisis. But here is my hope. Understanding what is really happening will allow us to make better decisions, protect our families, and perhaps create enough pressure to achieve real change. If this video opened your eyes, like and subscribe. I will create more content on how to survive and even prosper in the conditions of this economic crisis. Leave a comment and share your story. What part of this collapse are you feeling? How are you coping with it? Let's create a community of people who refuse to suffer in silence. And remember, stay informed, be prepared, and most importantly, stay strong. We will get through this together.